Okay, as you can see by the title, it's highly likely that it's going to invoke some kind of internal provocation for some people. That could be the reason why you've clicked on to watch it. If that's the case and you want to be provoked, then that's what you'll get. The intention behind this is to show you that what I've written in blue is a self-evident truth, which is obviously contradicting what the actual title of this video says, where they're presenting themselves, the two people that are in this video are presenting themselves as, I guess, purveyors of social justice, like legitimate justice. And so if you're here to learn how the deception is conducted, then there's going to be value for you if you're genuinely interested in doing that and learning and growing and seeing through the well-crafted deceit and how these people are part of that. Then there's plenty of value for you. But if, like I said, you're here to confirm your biases and prove that you're right, well, you're going to get value for that, because no matter what evidence gets presented to you, it's going to be dismissed. And so you're going to get to prove you're right. So it's totally a waste of your time if you want to do that. That's a choice you make, but then be ready for the consequences for denial of truth. Just one more thing before we get started. It's probably important that I add that this is about the family violence orders that magistrates place on innocent people where there's no evidence required that they've committed any crimes, and their entire lives are destroyed, their children's lives are destroyed, and the people who are willing to make up lies are the ones who end up falling deeper into a hole, and they're punishing their own children without realizing it. And so it's just a cycle of violence that explodes into just desperation and debauchery and outright destruction, because what's happening is people are being denied their inherent need for their paternal protectors to be an integral part of their lives. And anytime you do that, you go against the natural order of how life is imbued to function, and therefore you're only going to get destruction. And that's what these people are coming to stand up, so-called, and defend. But really what they're doing is they're protecting the underlying structure that makes sure that this is still going to go ahead. All right, so now we're going to go ahead and see the first clip.
It's important to note that police officers, I don't think we can really properly make any criticism of police officers who are attending to these matters and police prosecutors. They're mostly all honourable men and women, but their hands are tied by the law and by their standing orders from the police commissioner.
Okay, so before I even get into, where the most obvious thing is his body language, his nervousness, his jitteriness, the way his eyes were darting all over the place when he was trying to hide what his conscience knows is a lie. And you can see it in his body language. He even nodded his head sideways when he was saying those things about that you can't criticize the police. Before I even get through all that, we need to really set this up, that what's not being spoken about is the structural violence, and that is the removal of trial by jury, where the people are the final arbiter of any matter of moral behaviour, whether that be a public servant's behaviour or an individual community member. That people are the supreme law council through trial by jury, that has been totally rubbed out of human consciousness on the grand scale, and that's been an evolutionary thing, slowly and progressively, and we haven't had that for hundreds of years, well before this place they call Australia was established as a Commonwealth nation. That never even existed then, right? So that's not even being spoken about. That's actually the core of the whole issue of why we're even here looking at this kind of video, because if that was in place, there'd be none of this violation that these people are having a cry about, which they're actually participating in. But I'll get to that later. So let's look at the first part. Aside from his body language, which you can see he's dobbing himself in. So what's he doing? He's denying that police actually make an active choice to defy their moral compass. He never raises that once, right? Not only that, their oath of office, right? When the oath of office is that they will administer the law, not fake law, not legislation, but the actual law, and that is the laws of nature, to the best of their capacities, right? These people have no idea what even that is, so how can they possibly do it, right? They're suppressing their intuitive understanding of that, right? So what he's saying is he's granting the fact that they are totally abhorrently behave. I'll say that word again, abhorrent manner that is destructive to the natural order of life. And now he's saying that self-deceit is a wonderful thing, right? And that's, that's what's more important, that these people, protect their illusion that they're an integral member of an immoral cult that performs the actions that bring suffering and slavery into reality. So he doesn't ever speak about any of that, but that's actually what's happening in reality, right? And so what's he doing? He's denying the true nature of moral culpability that actually exists in reality. And so what is honorable, because that's what he says, they're mostly honorable men and women, right? About being a paid professional predator. What is honorable about that? What's honorable about suppressing one's moral compass, right? Can someone explain that, please? I'd love to hear how that goes. So what else is he doing? He's dismissing I'll say that again. He's dismissing the validity of the viewer's capacity to use their moral faculties to scrutinize what he's saying by saying, I don't believe we can criticize, right? So he's already setting up a limit of where you're not to look, right? That's a classic thing that people who get involved in mind trickery, they use that tactic. That's like a go-to. So pay attention to the language he uses to obscure reality, how it really operates, where he says their hands are tied and they have no other choice because their hands are tied but to follow their standing orders. Like, what does it mean when he says standing orders? What's being implied there? Does it not imply that that's what they must follow? If they don't, they're bad people. Is he not implying that? That's the destructive nature of what's being put forward here. When that's being put forward as something that exists in reality, that obscures how reality really works, and that is, that we all are imbued with personal responsibility to be conscious about what we do, because we have the moral faculties that allow us to access that level of awareness. And because we're imbued with that, there's no level of mental gymnastics that can deny that that's a personal responsibility, and that we and only we are responsible for the actions we take, regardless of what mental excuses we make up. That's what he's obscuring. So, does he ever discuss the fact that these individuals, who he calls police, are putting their free will behind transgressing against the natural laws that exist in reality, and he's supporting the lie? Does he actually, give any credence to the fact that that's what he's actually doing? He's not going to do that. And what about the fact that he's defending the violator of universal spiritual laws that we're all bound to? Anyone who's a sentient being who has the capacity to understand the difference between harmful and supportive behaviors, they are subject to these spiritual laws, whether they like it or not, whether they believe it or not, it doesn't change. That's just how the reality works. We never hear anything about that, right? So he's denying all these things that exist in reality. So he's setting up that following orders is virtuous, regardless of the resulting harm that comes from those actions, right? So that's what he's actually setting up there. So that's the first part before we go into the next video clip.
A prosecutor who resists putting this sort of case forward, a magistrate who speaks out, makes any sort of comment in court about a false allegation, anything like that. We have this army of feminists out there and media who are, part of this whole, what I think it's a virtual conspiracy, if you like, to, attack anybody who speaks out about what's going on here. And it's no wonder the magistrates are very quiet. They never make any comment about what's going on, do they? Publicly.
No, they don't. They don't want to appear anything other than impartial, and that's quite right and proper. And I think the police feel the same way, although, of course, for the police, there's a very real danger that they can be disciplined if they don't do as they are ordered to do.
So as you can see, our friend Bettina here, she starts joining in and defending the lie, right? So what is she doing? She's like making a whopper of a moral transgression by actually supporting that succumbing to fear is a virtue, right? So what she's saying is that it's a good thing to suppress your moral compass and your conscience in order to keep your job, and a moral job. Like, think about how outrageous that is, right? And so that's a higher priority than living a dignified existence where you're actually caring for life equally and wanting to contribute to the quality of all life on this planet. And that there's nothing that would get in the way of that. That's been the highest virtue. She doesn't mention anything about that. It's just about, oh, well, they're being attacked by this group, this imaginary group called the feminists, which is all another psyop, because that's just an excuse for the real people who sit behind all of those structures and all those mind control programs that is responsible for such groups showing up. And if you're going to deny your capacity to understand reality as it works, and everyone has that ability, and then start joining in immorality and then give yourself a label like a feminist, for example, that's just hiding behind a group. That's you denying your personal responsibility for the choice you've made. So then again, that's why the karmic consequences will come to you. Whether you believe it or not, whether you hear what I'm saying is inflammatory, that doesn't change the facts of how reality works. So anyway, she's giving credence to this so-called group. There's no individual responsibility for the lies that she's telling herself by saying, well, they're succumbing to fear because that's all they've got to choose from. They don't get to choose not to do it. That's not a choice for them. I mean, where does that ever get brought into it, right? And where in reality would anyone else accept immoral behavior as being it's an okay thing to do, and you're not personally responsible for the choice you make of what you do with your body? Where else in reality would it happen if it's not under that belief that most people have, that we must have a set of parasitic rulers running the system in order for us to have some kind of social organization? Like, that's the viral impregnated lie that's that most people accept on some level. Because if you wouldn't accept it, if that behavior was done on an individual one-to-one basis where there's no power differential, then why would you allow there to be such a power differential ever? Like, that's your first question you need to be able to answer. And then you listen to what he does, where he actually justifies the police, like that it's okay for them to do what they're doing because why? Fear again, right? So let's look at that idea of impartiality. What does that mean? Can you be impartial while you actually remain silent about the actions that you're performing that are the initiation of harm to another sentient being that's equal to you under the laws that govern this universe, right? Explain how that is remaining impartial, right? And so there's an intention to commit malicious intent, right, to somebody because you're denying them their innate right. So that's malicious intent. No matter which way you cut it, that's exactly what it is, because we all have a moral compass. We all know how to access it, and we all get to choose whether we suppress that or not, right? No one else can force us to do that. We can't be made to morally be obliged to do something immoral. That doesn't exist in reality. Right? So through wordplay and the mind virus lie that they've accepted, right? Because the fear is that, well, if we really scrutinize the true nature of this violation, then there's going to be anarchy. Like anarchy is a terrible thing. It just means that there's no one going to be ruling over you. That's all it means, that you are going to be the master of your own body and what you do with it. And no one has the right to impose any kind of force or violent interference upon you. And if they do, there's consequences for that behavior. So then we're not condoning it, right? Well, what she's doing is condoning it by denying facts as they exist in reality. And so there's the setup of the belief that the actual perpetrator of the violence, which is the police, they're the ones who do the harm, right? that they're now a victim because they're acting appropriately because, they're in fear of being punished, So there's just another excuse for immoral behavior. Well, we can't have them being in fear of being punished. It's not like they have a choice that, they don't need to do this as a job. They don't have that choice, do they? Nah, let's not look at that. Like someone is actually coming forward and actively choosing to do this role, and it's people who call themselves police, right? So they're actively choosing to cause harm to other people, and they're hiding behind these mind viruses to deny their personal responsibility, and this guy is enabling it, right? That's why the title is Enablers of Domestic Terrorism. So he's supporting this pack mentality, right? That there's this group that don't have individual choice, right? That's outright collectivism. So he's showing you he's a collectivist. That's what both of them are actually supporting without saying it out loud, as opposed to the way reality is structured, and that is that each individual has a moral responsibility for their personal choice to violate the moral laws that govern reality. And if they're not talking about that, there's never going to be any conscious growth in people's awareness for us to actually start changing our behavior and stop condoning this kind of way of being forced to live into a slavery system that benefits a very small number of people that are the masters of mind trickery, that are very good at manipulating people's consciousness. So that's what they miss out on. And if you're not talking about that, then you're part of it. That's just the way reality works. So that's that one covered. So it looks like this is going a lot longer than I was hoping. Obviously, I've got lots to say. Because of that, I'm going to just put one more clip in, and it's going to be Mark Passio explaining how the laws of nature actually work, and if we refuse to align ourselves with them, we're going to keep doing and getting these negative consequences. Really critical to understand. So this is what you won't hear from people like this, and anyone who's not sharing this kind of information is, without realizing it, it doesn't really matter. The actions, regardless of how much they can recognize, are still contributing to more slavery. And that's the point of this video, is to show you that domestic terrorism is alive and well by the people who say they fight for freedom while they ignore their moral compass and their capacity to access the truth as it exists in reality. So last word from Mark, and then a quick wrap up at the end.
Dark Luciferianism, I make the distinction, is like Satanism, but at a higher level. And these people are rebelling against the laws of creation, and they want to put themselves into power as God on earth. They would rather reign in hell than serve in heaven, as the saying goes. And they really know how natural law functions, but are skirting it in a way by getting other people who are their order followers to do their dirty work for them. And in doing that, they don't take on, the dark Luciferians don't take on the brunt of karmic consequence. The one who does the behavior takes on the brunt of the karmic consequence, because they brought the physical harm into manifestation with their own body of their own free will.
Okay, so there you have it. There it is. Really simple, not too confusing. You can only be responsible for that which you do and that which you accept as true. So if you allow yourself to accept a lie as truth and then you act on that lie, that responsibility comes on you and only you. And when you've got a collective of individuals who are doing the same thing, does that make it any less of a lie? That's the question. Right, so I'm going to run out of time to put everything I want to in this video. So there's going to be most likely a part 2, 3, maybe even a 4. I'm not sure yet, because there's a lot more that these guys talk about that's really, really important to unpack, to show how deep their deception and their willingness to deceive themselves and others runs. So what's here to understand is that we all have a responsibility for what we choose to believe and then the actions we take because of it. And these people, both of them, are making a ton of excuses and justifications for propping up a structure that's immoral, that's been deliberately created by immoral men to get others to do their bidding for them. Right? So you have a conscience. That means you know the objective difference between actions that are helpful to life and actions that are harmful to life. So all the mental gymnastics in the world doesn't change that. That's not how reality works. Reality cares about what you actually do with your action, what you put your energy into, that is what gets manifested. And there's consequences for everything that gets manifested. And so we are living those negative consequences. And people like this, they're actually keeping it going. They're propping it up so it stays in play for longer. And the only way it's going to stop is if people who are listening to this, or anyone else who happens to come across this, actually takes an interest to really understand the truth of what's here. So that's a choice that all of you have. And if that's you, if you're serious about that, there's a place where you can look that can support you into starting to activate and put your actions into that which is going to actually stand against these lies and these deceptions. That's why I go on about the 1215 Magna Carta, because within that, it's not the entire document, but within that is what is known as common law articles. And that is the part that forms the actual constitution. Now, just like nature has its own constitution, which means boundary conditions for existence to occur, a legitimate constitution that's written by man does the same thing. It outlines the boundary conditions that are necessary for man to live in harmony with the laws that exist in nature. It's really basic. Now, if that's something you really care about and want to get more intimate with, then here's a place where you can go and find that information out. Okay, so if you're looking to find some kind of guidance about moral principle, and that there is actually a structure in place that was built on moral principle, where the system of governance, which just means system of public servants and administration of how services will be delivered to the people equitably in order to advance the quality of all lives equally. This site has got plenty on it. I'm just going to quickly, I'm not going to go too much into it because I've done plenty of other videos about that. But here we go, it's already standing on principle. You can see that unifying our community. It talks about the 1901 Australia Crime Punishment Manifesto, which is the 1901 Commonwealth of Australia Constitution. So it talks about why that's a fraud and how that's just more enslavement. And then you've got participate in our police letter campaign. If you want to do that, you can click on that, take you right there, subscribe to the mailing list. As you go back up here, you can see all the different places you can look into. And so anyway, that's for you to discover in your own time, but just giving you a resource, it's magnacarta1215.com. There you go.